The doors of the orientation hall slid open with a soft hiss. Hyun stepped inside, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked around the massive room with wide eyes. The ceiling stretched so high above him that he could barely see it. Hundreds of seats floated in neat rows, each one designed for a different type of student. Hyun had never seen so many different aliens in one place. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled under the lights. Others were clouds of gas held together by force fields. A few resembled plants with moving vines. One student near the front appeared to be made entirely of liquid metal that shifted and flowed constantly. He walked down the aisle trying to find an empty seat. As he passed, students turned to look at him. Then they quickly looked away. Some whispered to each other. Others moved their belongings to take up extra seats. Hyun noticed but tried not to let it bother him. This was his first day at the Galactic Convergence Academy. He wanted to make a good impression. Finally, he found an empty row near the middle. He sat down and pulled out his datapad. The device had been modified to work with human hands. Most galactic technology was designed for species with tentacles or energy manipulation abilities. A student floated into the seat next to him. This alien looked like a jellyfish, but with dozens of glowing spots that pulsed different colors. The student glanced at Hyun, and all its spots suddenly turned dark purple. It quickly moved to a different row. Hyun sighed. He had read about this in the pre-arrival materials. Earth was classified as a Class 12 death world. Most species in the galaxy came from peaceful planets with gentle weather and friendly animals. Earth, with its hurricanes and lions and volcanic eruptions, terrified them. And humans who survived all of that terrified them even more. The lights in the hall dimmed. A figure materialized on the stage at the front. Professor Veltrix looked like a person made of purple crystal. Light passed through her body and created rainbow patterns on the floor. Her voice came from everywhere at once, smooth and clear. "Welcome, students, to Advanced Survival Practicum," she said. "This course will prepare you for unexpected situations and hostile environments. You will learn the skills needed to survive when things go wrong." A holographic display appeared above the stage. It showed images of different planets. Some had storms. Others had deserts or frozen wastelands. One showed a jungle with plants that appeared to be moving. "In this course you will face challenges," Professor Veltrix continued. "Difficult challenges. You will be tested physically and mentally. Some of you may find this course too demanding. There is no shame in withdrawing." Hyun leaned forward with interest. This sounded exciting. Back on Earth, he had loved camping with his family. They would hike in the mountains and sleep under the stars. His father had taught him how to build shelters and find clean water. His mother had shown him which plants were safe to eat. Around him, other students looked worried. A small alien with blue fur was shaking. Another student, whose body seemed to be made of thousands of tiny insects flying in formation, was buzzing loudly with stress. "Your main assignment will be a survival simulation," the professor said. "You will spend 72 hours in a controlled environment that mimics a Class 5 world. You will have limited supplies. You must find food, water, and shelter. You must survive." A collective gasp went through the hall. Several students stood up and hurried toward the exits. Their spots or lights or whatever they had were flashing with alarm. Hyun thought a Class 5 world didn't sound too bad. He had read the classification system. Class 1 worlds were the safest, with perfect weather and no dangerous animals. Class 5 worlds had some temperature changes and a few challenges, but nothing serious. Earth was Class 12. Only a few planets in the known galaxy were rated higher. "I understand your concern," Professor Veltrix said, her crystal body dimming slightly with sympathy. "This is why we have the best medical team standing by. Emergency extraction is available at any moment. We have never lost a student in this course." This made some students sit back down, though they still looked nervous. "You will work in groups to prepare," the professor continued. "Study together, train together, support each other. The simulation is in 6 weeks. Use that time wisely." The presentation ended. The lights came back on. Students began gathering their things and talking in small groups. Hyun stood and tried to approach a nearby cluster of students. "Hi," he said with a friendly smile. "I'm Hyun. Would you like to study together?" The students stared at him. One of them, a creature that looked like a floating brain in a jar, actually cracked its glass container slightly. They all moved away quickly. Hyun tried again with another group. This time, a student with green skin and 4 arms spoke. Sorry, our group is full, the student said, even though there were only 2 of them. This pattern repeated several times. Each time Hyun was politely rejected. Finally, he decided to just go back to his dorm room. As he walked through the halls of the academy, he passed by windows that looked out into space. The station orbited a neutron star, and the view was beautiful. Streams of energy flowed from the star in brilliant colors. His room was small but comfortable. The bed had been specially made for his size and shape. Most galactic species didn't sleep lying down. Some didn't sleep at all. Hyun sat on his bed and opened his datapad. He started reading about Class 5 worlds. The temperature could change between 10 and 35 degrees Celsius. The gravity would be slightly higher than Earth's. There would be some large herbivores, but no predators. He laughed quietly. This was less dangerous than a summer camping trip back home. In the mountains of Earth, temperatures could swing even more wildly. Bears and wolves were real threats, not peaceful plant eaters. And Earth's gravity was already considered high by galactic standards. But the other students were so afraid. Hyun felt bad for them. They couldn't help that they came from safer worlds. He decided he would do his best in the class, and maybe, if he did well, the other students would see that humans weren't monsters. They were just adapted to a tougher environment. Over the next few days, Hyun attended his classes. He was always polite and friendly. In the cafeteria, he ate alone while other students whispered and pointed. In the library, he studied survival techniques that seemed very basic to him, but he took notes anyway. Sometimes he would see other students from his survival practicum class. They traveled in groups now, already forming study teams. One group had matching uniforms. Another group had hired a personal trainer to help them build strength for the higher gravity. A small part of Hyun felt lonely, but a bigger part of him understood. These students were scared, and fear made people act defensively. He would just have to show them through his actions that there was nothing to fear. He didn't know it yet, but he would get that chance very soon. And when he did, the entire academy would be watching. 3 weeks had passed since orientation. Hyun sat in the survival practicum classroom, surrounded by empty seats. The nearest student was 5 rows away. He had gotten used to this by now. Professor Veltrix stood at the front of the room. Her crystal body caught the light from the display screens behind her. Today she looked more serious than usual. The rainbow patterns that usually danced across her surface were muted and slow. "Today I will give you the complete details of your final assignment," she announced. "Please pay close attention. Your preparation starts now." The room fell silent. Even the students who made constant humming or clicking sounds went quiet. Everyone leaned forward. A massive holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a rotating planet covered in green forests and blue oceans. Mountains rose from the continents. Rivers wound through valleys. "This is your simulation environment," Professor Veltrix explained. "It is modeled after a real Class 5 world called Verdania Prime. You will spend 72 hours here. 3 full days and nights." She waved her crystalline hand and the image zoomed in. Now they could see the forest floor covered in plants and small creatures. "The temperature will range from 10 degrees Celsius at night to 35 degrees during the day," she continued. "The gravity will be 1.2 times galactic standard. There will be herbivores present. Some are as large as a personal transport vehicle." A student named Taejin raised one of his thin, glowing arms. His skin pulsed with a nervous yellow color. "Professor, how large exactly?" "Approximately 4 meters tall," Veltrix replied. "But they are not aggressive unless provoked. They are plant eaters." This did not seem to comfort Taejin. His glow shifted to a sickly green color. The professor continued listing the challenges. Limited food supplies at the start. Water sources that needed to be located and purified. The need to build shelter before nightfall. Navigation without advanced technology. With each new detail, the students looked more worried. One student's tentacles drooped so low they touched the floor. Another began making a high-pitched whining sound. Hyun took notes on his datapad, but mostly he felt confused. These conditions sounded almost pleasant. The temperature range was narrower than most places on Earth. The gravity was actually lower than home. And herbivores that didn't attack? That was basically a petting zoo. "You will be allowed to bring 1 small pack with basic supplies," Professor Veltrix said. "But you must source your own food and water after the first day. You must create your own shelter." You must maintain your body temperature in safe ranges. A student named Yuna raised several of her sensory stalks. They waved in the air like seaweed in water. Professor, will we have protective suits? Standard environmental suits will be provided, the professor confirmed. They will help regulate your temperature and protect you from minor injuries. However, they will not do the work for you. You must still actively survive. Yuna's stalks drooped with relief, but only slightly. Medical teams will monitor you constantly, Professor Veltrix added. If your vital signs become dangerous, you will be extracted immediately. You can also activate an emergency beacon at any time. However, using the beacon means you fail the assignment. The room erupted in whispers and worried chatter. Students turned to their study groups, already planning and strategizing. Hyun raised his hand. Professor, are the protective suits required? The entire room went silent. Every student turned to stare at him. Professor Veltrix's crystal body flickered with surprise. They are not required, she said slowly, but they are very strongly recommended. Why do you ask? I was just wondering, Hyun said. I prefer to feel the environment directly. It helps me adapt better. Several students made sounds of shock. One student actually fainted and had to be revived by a medical drone that zipped in from the ceiling. That is, your choice, Professor Veltrix said, but please reconsider. The simulation is designed to be challenging even with protection. Hyun nodded politely but didn't commit to anything. He had been camping in worse conditions with just a sleeping bag and a water bottle. A protective suit would actually make it harder for him to sense things like wind direction and temperature changes. After class, students rushed out in their groups. Hyun heard them talking as they passed. Did you hear the human? One whispered. He wants to go without protection. Deathworlders are insane, another replied. He probably thinks this is easy. I heard humans can survive for days without water. Days. My species would die in 6 hours. Hyun packed his things slowly, letting the crowd clear. As he walked toward the door, he noticed Taijin standing alone near the wall. The small alien's bioluminescent skin was flickering with different colors rapidly. He looked stressed. Are you okay? Hyun asked, keeping his distance so he wouldn't frighten him. Taijin jumped. His skin flashed bright white with alarm. I'm fine. Totally fine. The assignment does sound tough, Hyun offered. Are you in a study group? Yes, no. I was, but... Taijin's colors shifted to a sad blue. They said I was too weak. They said I would slow them down. Hyun felt a surge of sympathy. He knew what it felt like to be excluded. You're not too weak. You got into this academy. That means you're capable. But I'm from a Class 1 world, Taijin said quietly. My planet has perfect weather every day. The temperature never changes. There are no dangerous animals. No storms, nothing. I've never had to survive anything. Then this is your chance to learn, Hyun said. And learning is what we're here for, right? Taijin looked at him with large, curious eyes. His skin slowly shifted to a cautious orange. You're different than I expected. The others say humans are dangerous. We're just adapted to a different environment, Hyun explained. That doesn't make us dangerous. It just makes us different. Before Taijin could respond, a group of his classmates appeared. They called out to him, and Taijin's skin flushed with embarrassment. He quickly said goodbye to Hyun and hurried to join them. Hyun heard them scolding Taijin for talking to the human. Over the following weeks, the academy transformed. Students from the survival class were everywhere, training desperately. Hyun would see them in the gym, struggling to lift weights in higher gravity settings. He would pass them in the halls, wearing their protective suits and practicing emergency procedures. One popular student named Minho, whose consciousness existed as a floating cluster of energy, had hired 3 personal trainers. He practiced maintaining his form in different temperature conditions. Other students watched and took notes, treating him like a celebrity. Study groups met in every available space. The library was constantly full. Students traded tips and resources. They formed alliances and backup plans. Hyun trained too, but differently. He went to the academy's recreation level, where they had simulated natural environments. He jogged through the artificial forest, getting used to the station's gravity, which was actually lower than Earth's. He practiced building shelters from branches and leaves. He studied the edible plants database. Sometimes other students would see him training. They would stop and stare as he ran past without looking tired, or they would watch in horror as he casually handled thorny plants with his bare hands. his skin too thick to be easily pierced. One day, Hyun was in the recreation forest practicing fire starting. He was using 2 sticks and some dry moss. After a few minutes of friction, a small flame appeared. He carefully fed it with twigs until he had a small but steady fire. He didn't notice the crowd that had gathered to watch. When he finally looked up, at least 20 students were standing at the edge of the forest staring at him. Their expressions ranged from fascination to horror. "Did he just make fire?" one whispered. "With wood? Primitive materials? My species hasn't made fire manually in 10,000 years." Hyun waved at them nervously. They all scattered like frightened birds. As the simulation day approached, the anxiety on the station grew. Medical staff ran drills. Emergency teams practiced extraction procedures. The cafeteria started serving high-nutrition meals to help students build their strength. Hyun continued his simple preparation. He made a small pack with basic tools. He reviewed his knowledge of water purification and shelter building. He made sure his boots were comfortable. The night before the simulation, he couldn't sleep. Not because he was nervous, but because he was excited. He missed the outdoors. He missed feeling the sun on his face and hearing real birds. Even a simulation would be nice. In rooms all across the station, other students also couldn't sleep. But they were terrified. They sent messages to their families. They reviewed their emergency beacon procedures one more time. They wondered if they would survive. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow they would all learn what it meant to survive, and Hyun, without knowing it, was about to show the entire galaxy what a human could do. The simulation chamber was enormous. It took up an entire deck of the station, a space so large that Hyun couldn't see the far walls. The ceiling glowed with artificial sunlight that felt almost real. The air smelled like earth and plants. Students gathered near the entrance in small groups. Most wore thick protective suits that covered them completely. The suits had temperature controls, impact padding, and built-in medical monitors. Some students had added extra equipment: breathing filters, emergency lights, backup power cells. Hyun stood alone as usual. He wore simple clothes, a t-shirt, cargo pants, and hiking boots. His small backpack contained a water bottle, some rope, a knife, a basic first aid kit, and a fire starter. That was all. Professor Veltrix stood on a platform where everyone could see her. Medical staff in white uniforms lined the walls. Extraction drones hovered silently overhead, ready to pull out any student in trouble. "Students," the professor's voice echoed through the chamber. "In a moment you will enter the simulation. Remember your training. Stay calm, work systematically, help each other when possible, and most importantly, do not hesitate to use your emergency beacon if you need help." She paused and looked across all the students. Her crystal body pulsed with concern. There is no shame in extraction. This course is meant to teach you, not harm you. Your safety is our primary concern. Near Hyun, a student was shaking so hard that their protective suit rattled. Another student was being sick into a disposal unit. Minho, the energy-based student, flickered weakly even though the simulation hadn't started yet. Professor Veltrix gestured to the entrance. "You may begin. The 72 hours start now." For a moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, study groups began walking toward the entrance. They held on to each other for support. Some were crying. Others were trying to encourage their teammates. Hyun walked forward with an easy stride. As he passed through the entrance, he felt the environment change. The air became more humid. He heard birds singing somewhere in the distance. Leaves rustled in a gentle breeze. He smiled. This felt good. The entrance led to a forest clearing. Trees surrounded them on all sides. A stream bubbled somewhere nearby. The ground was covered in moss and fallen leaves. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden beams. Students spread out quickly, each group claiming a different section of the clearing. Some immediately began unpacking their supplies. Others consulted their data pads, trying to match what they saw with what they had studied. Hyun took a deep breath, enjoying the fresh air. Then he started walking toward the sound of water. The stream would be important. Everything else would be easier once he found a good water source. Behind him, he heard a loud crash. He turned to see Taejin lying on the ground. The small alien had tripped over a root. His bioluminescent skin flashed with pain and embarrassment. His study group members were trying to help him up, but they were struggling. The gravity here was harder for them than it was for Hyun. Hyun considered helping, but he remembered how scared they had been when he approached before. He didn't want to make things worse. so he continued toward the stream. In the monitoring room, dozens of professors and staff watched screens that showed every angle of the simulation. Each student had a tracker that displayed their vital signs. Some of the screens were already flashing yellow with warnings. Student 47 is showing elevated stress hormones, one technician reported. Student 82's body temperature is dropping. Too fast, said another. Professor Veltrix watched the screens carefully. Then she noticed one particular display. Why is student 01 showing normal readings? Did his monitor malfunction? A technician checked the data. No, Professor. The monitor is working correctly. The human's vitals are completely stable. Heart rate is actually slightly lower than his baseline. Lower. Veltrix's crystal body flickered with confusion. He should be experiencing stress. Everyone experiences stress in a new environment. Perhaps humans define stress differently, the technician suggested. On the screen, they watched Hyun reach the stream. He knelt down and put his hand in the water. He felt the temperature and the current. He looked at the rocks at the bottom, checking for algae. He followed the stream with his eyes, looking for the best place to set up camp. In less than 2 minutes, he had found a perfect spot. A flat area near the water, protected by large rocks on one side and trees on the other. High ground so he wouldn't flood if it rained. Close to the stream, but not so close that animals coming to drink would walk through his camp. He set down his backpack and got to work. First, shelter. He gathered fallen branches and long sticks. He found some that were already dry and strong. He arranged them in a lean-to structure against one of the large rocks. He covered the frame with layers of leaves and moss, making sure they overlapped like roof tiles to shed water. The whole process took him about 20 minutes. When he was done, he had a shelter large enough to lie down in, well insulated and waterproof. In the monitoring room, several professors had gathered around Hyun's screen. Is he using primitive construction techniques? One asked. Yes, Veltrix confirmed. That shelter design is thousands of years old. But look how quickly he works, and he didn't need to consult any reference materials. His species must have strong cultural memory, another professor suggested. Survival knowledge passed down through generations. Next, Hyun focused on water. He took out his water bottle and filled it from the stream. But he didn't drink yet. First, he gathered small rocks and built a simple filter system using sand and charcoal he made from the fire pit he was preparing. He poured the water through the filter, then boiled it over a small fire. The fire had been easy to start. The fire starter in his pack worked on the first try, but even without it, Hyun knew at least 3 other ways to make fire. His father had taught him all of them during their camping trips. While the water boiled, he explored the area. He found several edible plants. Some had berries. Others had roots that could be cooked. He even found a patch of wild onions. He gathered some but left most of them so the plants could continue growing. By the time the sun was halfway across the sky, Hyun had a complete camp. Shelter, clean water, food gathered, fire burning steadily. He had even made a simple fishing line from his rope and a hook from a bent piece of wire in his first aid kit. He sat down on a comfortable log he had positioned near the fire. He took a drink of his purified water. Then he bit into some of the berries he had found. They were sweet and tasted a bit like strawberries. This is nice, he said to himself. In the monitoring room, silence had fallen. Every professor was staring at Hyun's screen. How long has it been? Someone finally asked. 4 hours since the simulation began, a technician replied. And he's done? It appears so. His camp has everything: shelter, water source, food, fire, and tools. His vital signs indicate he is completely relaxed. Professor Veltrix looked at the other screens. Most students were still struggling with basic tasks. Study groups were arguing about the best place to set up camp. Several students had already used their emergency beacons and been extracted. Others were sitting on the ground, overwhelmed and crying. Taejin's group had managed to activate their prefabricated shelter, but it had collapsed twice already. Yuna was suffering from sensory overload. The simulation environment had too many smells and sounds for her sensitive stalks. She was curled up in a ball, trying to block everything out. Minho's consciousness was flickering dangerously. The energy-based student was having trouble maintaining his form in the outdoor environment. His trainers had prepared him for temperature changes, but not for the constant stimulation of wind, light, and natural energy fluctuations. Should we extract more students? A medical officer asked. Veltrix thought carefully. Not yet. Give them time to adapt, but keep watching closely. She looked back at Hyun's screen. The human had finished eating and was now weaving something from plant fibers. It looked like he was making a basket. He's crafting tools, someone observed. For fun? I don't think it's for fun, Veltrix said quietly. I think this is just normal for him. Humans must do this regularly on their world. No wonder Earth is a Class 12 death world, another professor muttered. If their inhabitants consider this relaxing. As evening approached, Hyun added more wood to his fire. He caught 2 fish from the stream using his improvised line. He cooked them on flat rocks heated by the fire. They tasted delicious. Around the simulation area, other students were facing the approaching night with dread. Temperature was dropping. Shadows were growing longer. Strange sounds came from the forest, but Hyun lay down in his shelter, comfortable and warm. He looked up at the simulated stars appearing in the artificial sky. He thought about home, about his family, about the real forests of Earth, and then, peacefully, he fell asleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow, he would discover that he wasn't alone in struggling. But unlike the others, his struggle would be about how to help, not how to survive. The third morning of the simulation started peacefully. Hyun's camp had become a small village. 7 rescued students rested in various states of recovery. The fire burned steadily. Food and water were plentiful. Everyone was safe and stable. Hyun was teaching Taejin how to weave plant fibers into rope when an alarm sounded. Not a regular alarm, but a loud, urgent blaring that echoed through the entire simulation chamber. In the monitoring room, red lights flashed across every control panel. What's happening? Professor Veltrix demanded. System malfunction, a technician shouted, fingers flying across controls. The temperature regulation system is failing. It's rising rapidly. How rapidly? Currently at 38 degrees Celsius and climbing. It's already exceeded safe parameters for most species. Emergency extraction. Now, Veltrix ordered. Get everyone out. But more alarms sounded. Professor, the extraction drones are not responding. The system malfunction has affected them too. Manual extraction then. Send in the emergency teams. They're suiting up now, but it will take at least 10 minutes to enter the chamber safely. Veltrix looked at the screen showing the students. All across the simulation, students were collapsing. The heat was too much for species adapted to cooler climates. Emergency beacons activated everywhere as students desperately tried to signal for help. She looked at Hyun's screen. The human had stood up and was looking around. His rescued students were already showing signs of distress. Taejin's glow was fading. Yuna's stalks were drooping. Minho was flickering dangerously. The human will activate his beacon, a technician predicted. He has to. His rescued students are in danger. But Hyun didn't reach for his beacon. Instead, he started moving quickly, purposefully. What is he doing? Someone asked. They watched as Hyun examined the area around his camp with focused intensity. He was looking for something specific. Then his face brightened. He had found it. About 50 meters from his camp, there was a cave entrance. It was small and partially hidden by vines. Hyun had noticed it on his first day, but hadn't needed it. Now it was perfect. He ran back to camp. Everyone, listen to me. His voice was calm but commanding. We need to move. There's a cave nearby. It will be cooler inside. Can anyone walk? Taejin tried to stand, but his injured arm made it difficult. Yuna couldn't move at all. Minho was barely conscious. None of them could make it on their own. Okay, Hyun said. I'll carry you. One at a time, stay calm. Trust me. He picked up Yuna first, the heaviest. He moved quickly but carefully toward the cave. The temperature was now at 42 degrees. Sweat poured down Hyun's face, but he didn't slow down. He had hiked in similar heat in Death Valley on Earth. His body knew how to handle it. He set Yuna inside the cave, where it was noticeably cooler. Stay here. I'll be right back. He ran back for Taejin, then Minho, then the others one by one. Each trip took energy, but adrenaline and determination kept him going. His muscles burned. His breathing was heavy, but he didn't stop. In the monitoring room, every person was silent. They watched Hyun make trip after trip in increasingly dangerous heat. The temperature had reached 45 degrees Celsius. That's lethal for humans too, isn't it? Someone asked quietly. Eventually, Veltrix said, but they have higher tolerance than most species. And look at him. He's still moving, still strong. Finally, all 7 students were in the cave, but Hyun wasn't done. He made several more trips carrying supplies. Water containers, food, material for bandages, anything that might be useful. On his last trip, he grabbed burning branches from his fire and brought them to the cave entrance. He didn't want the fire to spread in his absence, but he wanted light and the ability to restart it later. By the time he ducked into the cave himself, the temperature outside had reached 48 degrees. He was exhausted, drenched in sweat, breathing hard, but he was smiling. "Everyone okay?" he asked, checking each student. They nodded weakly. The cave was much cooler, maybe 25 degrees. The thick rock walls insulated them from the heat outside. "What's happening?" Taejin asked. "Is this part of the simulation?" "I don't think so," Hyun said. "I think something went wrong. But we're safe here. We just need to wait." He distributed water to everyone, making sure they drank slowly. He checked their vital signs as best he could. He positioned them in the coolest parts of the cave. Then he sat down near the entrance, keeping watch. "Aren't you scared?" Yoon asked, her stalks trembling. "A little," Hyun admitted. "But panic doesn't help. My father taught me that. In an emergency, you stay calm. You assess the situation. You solve problems one at a time. You didn't activate your beacon." Minho flickered weakly. "You could have been extracted. You could have been safe." "I was already safe," Hyun said. "I can handle this heat for a while." "But you couldn't. If I left, you would have died. So I stayed." The students looked at him with new understanding. This human, this creature from a deadly world, wasn't dangerous to them. He was their protector. In the monitoring room, emergency teams had finally entered the chamber. They were extracting students from across the simulation area. But when they reached the cave, they found something unexpected. 8 students, all alive, all stable, sitting together in a cool cave while the world outside was an oven, and in the middle of them, a human who had refused to save himself until everyone else was safe. The malfunction was fixed within an hour. The temperature dropped back to normal levels. The emergency teams brought all the students out of the simulation. Medical staff checked everyone thoroughly. All of Hyun's rescued students were fine. Tired, shaken, but unharmed. Students from other areas weren't as lucky. Several had suffered serious heat-related injuries. A few had been extracted just in time to prevent permanent damage. The next day, the entire Advanced Survival Practicum class gathered in the auditorium. Professor Veltrix stood at the front, her crystal body glowing with emotion. "Yesterday's malfunction was unprecedented," she began. "It should never have happened. I apologize to all of you for the danger you faced." She paused, looking across the crowd. "However, something remarkable came from this crisis. We learned what true survival means, and we saw it demonstrated by one student in particular. A holographic display showed footage from Hyun's rescue operations. The students watched in silence as Hyun carried them one by one, built shelters, provided care, and ultimately saved them from the heat crisis. "Hyun," Professor Veltrix said, "please stand." Hyun stood awkwardly. He wasn't comfortable being the center of attention. "You not only survived the simulation," the professor continued, "you excelled at it. You mastered skills that took you mere hours while others trained for weeks. You showed resourcefulness, knowledge, and incredible physical capability." She paused. "But more importantly, you showed compassion. You used your abilities not to dominate, but to help. You saved 7 lives. You put their survival before your own comfort, before your own grade, before your own safety." The auditorium was completely silent. "This is what we should all aspire to," Veltrix said. "Not just survival, but the strength to help others survive. Hyun, you received the highest marks possible, and you have my deepest respect." The room erupted in applause. Students who had avoided Hyun for weeks now clapped and cheered. Some were crying. Taejin stood up, his injured arm in a proper cast now. His bioluminescent skin glowed bright yellow with emotion. "I want to say something." Professor Veltrix nodded. "I was afraid of Hyun," Taejin said, his voice shaking. "We all were. We heard the stories about Deathworlders and we believed them. We thought humans were monsters, dangerous, aggressive." He looked at Hyun. "But I was wrong. We were all wrong. Hyun isn't dangerous. He's strong. There's a difference. He comes from a world that made him capable of incredible things, but he chooses to use that capability for good, to help, to protect." Taejin's skin shifted to a deep, sincere blue. "I'm sorry, Hyun, for avoiding you, for judging you. You're not a monster. You're a hero." One by one, other students stood and apologized. They shared their own stories of fear and realization. They talked about watching Hyun work and understanding that strength didn't equal danger. Yuna approached Hyun after the ceremony. Her sensory stalks waved in a friendly pattern. Would you want to get lunch together? I'd like to hear more about Earth. It sounds like a fascinating place. I'd like that, Hyun said with a genuine smile. More students approached. They wanted to be his friend. They wanted to learn from him. They wanted to understand the world that had created such a capable, kind person. Minho, his energy form now stable and bright, flickered with amusement. You know, there's an Earth Cultural Club forming. Several students who want to learn more about your planet. They'd love if you joined. Maybe even led it? Really? Hyun looked surprised and pleased. I'd be honored. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Hyun went from isolated outsider to one of the most popular students at the academy. But more than that, the whole station's perception of Deathworlders began to shift. Other human students at the academy reported better treatment. Classes began incorporating Earth survival techniques as advanced study materials. The cafeteria added Earth foods to the menu. A course on Deathworld biology became one of the most subscribed classes in the Academy's history. Hyun's rescue mission became legendary. Students who weren't even... Hyun woke up as the artificial sun began to rise. He had slept well, better than he usually did in his dorm room. The sounds of the forest had been soothing. The temperature had been comfortable. He stretched and crawled out of his shelter. The fire had burned down to embers overnight, but it was easy to add more wood and bring it back to life. He heated some water for drinking and ate some of the roots he had gathered yesterday. As he sat by his fire enjoying the peaceful morning, he pulled out his datapad. The simulation provided a basic map function that showed the locations of other students. It didn't give details, just dots on a map. But Hyun noticed that several dots weren't moving at all. He zoomed in on the nearest dot. It had been in the same spot since yesterday evening. That seemed strange. Even if someone was resting, they should move a little bit. Hyun felt a flutter of worry. Maybe the student was hurt or sick, or just too scared to move. He looked at his comfortable camp, then at the stationary dot on the map. He sighed. He couldn't just ignore it. What if someone really needed help? He packed some supplies into his backpack. Water, some food, basic first aid materials. He made sure his fire was safely contained. Then he started walking toward the stationary dot. The forest was beautiful in the morning light. Dew covered the leaves. Birds sang in the trees. Small animals rustled in the bushes. Hyun navigated easily, reading the landscape like a book. He could tell which way was north by looking at the moss on the trees. He could find water by listening for specific sounds. He could identify safe paths by checking the patterns of animal tracks. After about 30 minutes of walking, he heard a sound. A weak, high-pitched whimpering. He followed the sound and found Taejin. The small alien was lying under a tree, curled up into a ball. His bioluminescent skin was barely glowing, just a faint flicker of light. His protective suit had torn on a branch, and one of his thin arms was bent at a wrong angle. Taejin? Hyun called out softly, not wanting to startle him. Taejin's eyes opened slightly. When he saw Hyun, his skin flashed with fear. Please don't eat me, he whispered. Hyun blinked in surprise. Eat you? I'm not going to eat you. Are you hurt? My arm, Taejin said weakly. I fell. My group left me. They said I was slowing them down. I've been here all night. I'm so cold and thirsty. I think I'm dying. You're not dying, Hyun said firmly. He knelt down next to Taejin, moving slowly so he wouldn't frighten him more. Your arm is injured and you're dehydrated, but we can fix that. He pulled out his water bottle and helped Taejin drink. The small alien sipped gratefully. Some of his glow returned. I'm going to pick you up now, Hyun warned. I need to get you back to my camp where it's safe. Okay? Taejin nodded weakly. Hyun carefully lifted him. The alien weighed almost nothing. His body was light and delicate, adapted for a world with gentle conditions. Carrying him was easier than carrying a backpack. Taejin whimpered as Hyun started walking, but then he realized something. The human's body was warm, very warm. Heat radiated from him like a personal heater. After a freezing night on the forest floor, that warmth felt wonderful. You're so warm, Taejin murmured. Like a star. Normal body temperature for a human, Hyun explained. About 37 degrees Celsius. Our bodies generate a lot of heat. That must take so much energy, Taejin said sleepily. We eat a lot, Hyun confirmed with a smile. In the monitoring room, alarms were going off. Multiple students were in distress. Medical teams were preparing for emergency extractions. But then someone noticed what was happening on Hyun's screen. Professor Veltrix. The human is carrying student 23. Veltrix turned to look. On the screen, she saw Hyun walking steadily through the forest with Taejin in his arms. Is he extracting him? Taking him to a beacon point? No, Professor. He's bringing him back to his own camp. His own camp? But he's supposed to focus on his own survival. Why would he? She stopped. Because he's already survived. He has surplus resources. He's helping because he can. The technicians watched in amazement as Hyun carried Taejin through the forest without any apparent effort. The human navigated obstacles smoothly, never stumbling, never slowing down. When they reached Hyun's camp, Taejin's eyes widened. You made all this? In one day? It's pretty basic, Hyun said modestly. He set Taejin down gently near the fire. Let me look at your arm. He examined the injury carefully. The arm was fractured, but not too badly. Hyun found 2 straight sticks and used strips of cloth from his first aid kit to make a splint. He worked with gentle precision and Taejin barely felt any pain. You know medicine? Taejin asked. First aid, Hyun corrected. Basic stuff. My mother insisted I learn before I left Earth. He secured the splint and nodded with satisfaction. That should hold until we can get you to a real doctor. But you need to keep it still. He gave Taejin more water and some of the cooked fish from yesterday. Eat slowly. Your stomach probably isn't happy right now. As Taejin ate, Hyun checked his map again. More stationary dots, more students who might need help. I need to check on the others, he said. Will you be okay here for a while? Taejin looked at the warm fire, the comfortable shelter, and the pile of food and water. I'll be fine. But Hyun, won't helping others hurt your own chances? This is a graded assignment. The assignment is to survive, Hyun said. I've already done that. Now I have time to help. He left Taejin by the fire and headed toward the next stationary dot. He found Yuna collapsed near a stream. Her sensory stalks were wrapped tightly around her body. She was making a low, distressed humming sound. The simulation environment had overwhelmed her completely. Her species processed information differently, and the constant input from the natural environment was too much. Hyun approached carefully. Yuna, can you hear me? One stalk unwrapped slightly. Too much. Everything is too much. Can't think. Can't move. I'm going to help you, Hyun said. I need to reduce the input. Trust me. He used large leaves to create a kind of hood around her sensory stalks. It blocked some of the light and sound. Almost immediately, Yuna's humming quieted. Better? He asked. Yes, she whispered. Thank you, but I still can't walk. The gravity is too much. Hyun looked at her body structure. She was different from Taejin, more spread out and heavier. But he could manage. I'll carry you. Close your stalks and try not to process anything. Just rest. He picked her up and started the walk back to his camp. It was harder this time. Yuna was heavier and the extra weight made him work. But he had carried heavier packs during mountain hikes on Earth. He could do this. By the time he got back to camp, he was sweating. Taejin looked surprised to see another rescued student. You're collecting everyone? Taejin asked. Just the ones who need help, Hyun replied. He set Yuna down in the shade of his shelter. He adjusted her leaf hood and made sure she had water within reach. Throughout the day, Hyun made 3 more trips. He found Minho flickering weakly, unable to maintain his energy form in the outdoor environment. Hyun fashioned a temporary containment field using materials from abandoned camps and some creative thinking. It wasn't perfect, but it gave Minho a stable space. He found another student trapped in a thorn bush too weak to break free. He found a student whose breathing apparatus had malfunctioned. He found a student suffering from heat exhaustion. Each time he brought them back to his camp. Each time he provided water, food, shelter, and first aid. His camp became a small rescue center. In the monitoring room, the situation had evolved beyond anything the professors expected. Every screen was now focused on Hyun's location. Professors from other departments had come to watch. Students who weren't in the simulation had gathered in viewing areas around the station. He's saving them all, someone whispered. Single-handedly, another added. And he doesn't look tired at all. He's barely sweating. Professor Veltrix watched Hyun split firewood with a sharp rock, providing heat for the students who were cold. She watched him purify more water from the stream. She watched him fashion tools and shelters and medical supplies from natural materials. "This is what a Deathworlder means," she said quietly. "Not dangerous, not violent, but capable, incredibly capable. In an environment that is killing our students, he is thriving, and he's using that advantage to help others." On the screen, Hyun was showing Taejin how to identify safe plants to eat. Taejin's skin glowed with fascination instead of fear now. He was actually smiling, his bioluminescence showing healthy green and yellow colors. "The human isn't a monster," Taejin said to the other rescued students. "He's kind. He saved us when everyone left us." Night fell on the second day. Around Hyun's campfire, 7 rescued students rested safely. They shared food that Hyun had gathered. They stayed warm by his fire. They listened as he told them stories about Earth, about camping with his family, about the beauty of surviving in nature. And for the first time since the simulation began, these students weren't afraid. They were learning, not just how to survive, but what survival could mean when you had the strength to help others. The next day would bring the final test, and a moment that would change how the galaxy saw humans forever.